In this clip, we're going to learn about tips for track matting. So I want to teach you how to get footage to go from totally white to totally black and vice versa. So I have this piece of footage right here that I'm just going to drop into our comp, and you can see that we've got a little bit of work to do on it. It's just a piece of footage from our partners at dissolve.com of some ink coming into water. And I love the way that the ink moves, but as you can see, this isn't going to be a proper track matte for a transition just because we don't go from one color to the other. So if I use this on my footage right now, and I go ahead and use LumaMatte, you can see it never totally goes from one to the other just because we don't ever get that full black and white. So I need to fix that. I'll delete those two pieces of footage I used for you as the example. And let's see how we can do this. So first of all, we need to start with totally white. And instead of just making this go totally white, there's some tricks we can do to create that. So I'm going to create a new solid layer that's white. Perfect. And we'll put that at the bottom of our stack. And I'm going to pull this forward a little bit because I don't want it to just start right away. I want to give myself a little bit of lead time. So let's come in here. Right there's good. And I just held shift to snap that to my current time indicator. And we'll just use this kind of roughly 20 seconds as a place to start. So first thing, we're going from white to our footage, so we need to fade our footage in. So I'll select my footage and hit the T key, and we'll start that at 0%. So we'll go from white, and right now it's at 0. Now let's give ourselves some keys for opacity. So I'll just back that up a little bit, right in there, and we'll bring that back up to 100. So now we start out with white, we have lots of lead time, and then our footage kind of fades on. All right. And then I need to add some brightness and contrast to this footage because right now it's just got too much yellow and too many colors that are somewhere in the middle. I want to keep it as black and white as I can. So we'll add our effects and presets panel. And we'll just come right over here and type in bright. Grab our brightness and contrast color correction effect. And let's turn up our brightness considerably. So I'm going to go up here to about 150. Okay, so this is working pretty well for what I want to do. Let's also turn up the contrast to really just max that out. Nice. Now also we are getting a lot of blue in here, so let's just go ahead and add a hue saturation effect and turn the saturation completely down. So now we're totally black and white. All right, this is starting to shape up for us pretty well. So I am starting to get an idea of how I want this to move. Now, one thing I don't like is the way that this just kind of fades on here. But because we've got so much white up in this corner, I think we can trick it so that it looks like it's actually moving into the frame instead of just fading on. So let's scale this up a little bit and just hit the S key so that I could actually see what the percentage was. And like right in there, I think is pretty good. And I'm going to pull this down and to the side just like that. So as this starts to come on, you can see now it looks like it's coming up from the bottom just because of this little change that we made. Perfect. Okay, so now we need to figure out how to get this to go totally to black because it starts to seem like it's going to black here and then we get this big circle of white that's not helpful. So let's just fill that in. So I'll go to layer and make a new layer that is a solid black layer this time. And I want to create a little mask that's kind of the shape of this circle. And I'll just double click to kind of put this in place here. Perfect. And then I'm going to want to move this obviously over time because we start out with this way down here in the corner. So right there before it gets very big, we'll pull this down here. And let's go ahead and key the scale of it over time as well as the position. So I hit the S key, I'll hold shift and hit the P key, and we'll just scale this down. Now you can see it's not scaling from the middle, so I'll grab my pan behind anchor point tool and move that to the middle of the mask. That'll help a lot. So let's scale this down right about there. Let's move in here, kind of get it into position. Looking right about there to start this. So hit position and scale on our black solid. And then let's move to where this starts to get a lot bigger, right about there. We'll scale this up a lot and move it into place. Okay, so we're getting a nice effect here, but obviously this is way too harsh. So let's go back into our mask and I'll add some feather so that it really starts to feel like it could actually be part of this ink. So that's just growing with us. And then right about here where we're really starting to make some headway, it's kind of right in between our two keys, I'm going to key my mask's expansion, because then what I can do is once I get to the end of this footage, I can just cause it to expand all the way to fill the frame. So we'll just make that a lot bigger there. And just like that, we fill the frame pretty completely. I think also over time we could turn down the brightness in the other direction. So let's look at our footage and try that out. Right now our brightness and contrast isn't keyed, so I'll key the brightness right here, and then over time we'll turn that down to 0. So this will really help to make that have that feeling we're going for. And also, because right now I'm scaling, you can see a little line right here because of the size of that solid. So I need to change up the way I'm doing this. Instead of keying my scale over time for my black solid, I need to actually change the shape's path to be bigger. So we'll keep our scale large like this, and I'll actually turn that off. And I'm going to make it just so that it fills my whole screen, so I'm not worried about any of that. And I moved the position a bit, so we'll just place this over the top of our other keyframe so it just overwrites it, just like that. Now, instead of completely moving it, we'll just change our mask path, so we don't even need to key the position. Just come in here to our mask and our mask path, and this is what we want it to be doing at the end. But at the beginning, I'll just double click this and make it much smaller and move it over here, maybe give it a little rotation. Need it to be filling up this little hole. And then right about there, we want this to be very, very small and out of frame. Perfect. Let's watch that over time. Much better. So now we're not getting that odd line like we were before by moving the whole solid. So sometimes it just takes a little bit of experimenting. You know, we tried one way and it gave us that line. So it's better to do the mask path in a situation like this instead of just keying the position and scale of the black solid, even though that may be how you work typically. Whenever you're working with mask expansion, sometimes it goes over the edge and then gives you some strange artifacts. So now let's see what happens if we just play this back. And just so we don't have to watch so much lead time on the white, I'll pull my work area in a bit there. So as you can see, as we were going through and just scrubbing it, it felt like it was going much faster. And we saw the transition in our previous clip where we did have what felt like a much more quick movement. But that's okay because we can play around with the timing of this once we get it looking the way we want. And right now I feel that this is actually working for me pretty well. So as long as we go totally to black and it stays there, that's what we want. So let's jump back out to our Party Comp Luma mat. And here we have the transition comp, and that's the comp we were in a moment ago. And if I scrub along here, you can see that nothing is happening, and that's because this comp is so long. On the inside, we were looking at a timeline that was about 1.5 minutes long. So I would have to move this a lot to even get to a point where we can see the transition. So instead, what I'd like to do, I'll just bring my current time indicator back here to the beginning and hit the open bracket key to pull that edge back there to the current time indicator. We'll just go over here to our stretch property and start to pull that down to decrease the length of time it takes to make this. So now I'm at about 8% of the original duration, and now we get our transition happening fairly quickly between these two. Now, I really don't want to see any black until my second piece of footage starts here, so we may need to increase the stretch a bit. Right there, about 11, maybe 10. That's perfect. So it doesn't start until the other footage comes on, and that's important. So now we can just go to our track mat, choose Luma mat, and now we get the same effect that we had earlier with our footage. Now, one thing I'm noticing is we are getting a little bit of a pop right here. So let's go in and see what's happening. Looks like we're still getting a bit. So let's key our feather over time in this corner. We'll just start it about right there. So we have 162 points of feather. We'll put that into play by this time, but here we'll just put that at 0. So now we certainly won't have our issue coming from our solid in the corner. And there we go. Now you can see we don't have that pop anymore. So sometimes it's just hard to see when it's black and white, but when you actually are using it as the transition, it's much more visible. All right, so that's a quick look at how you can create footage like this and edit it to work for you as a alpha or Luma track mat. Let's go ahead and jump into our next clip where we'll start learning about the preserve underlying transparency functionality in After Effects.